You are now listening to The Unwavering, the movement dedicated to educating and empowering the brave men and women who have or are still serving our great nation. What's up, everyone? This is Kevin with another episode of The Unwavering. For those of you guys who are just tuning in, I'm an 8-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I served as an avionics technician, quality assurance inspector, as well as a communication security advisor aboard the CH-53, VH-3, and VH-60 helicopters. Today, I'm super excited to interview another fellow podcaster, someone who has deep ties to the military community and is deeply committed to giving back to you as well as your families, which leads me to the next point. For everyone that is listening that is either active duty, a reservist, or a veteran, thank you so much for what you guys are doing or have done for us previously. This podcast is dedicated to you guys, to your families, and we truly hope that it makes a difference in your lives. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Natalie and let her introduce herself.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me. I'm Natalie Gross. I'm the host of The Spouse Angle, which is a podcast breaking down the news for military spouses and their families. That's kind of my tagline. I've been hosting and producing the show since October. That's when we launched. And I'm also a freelance journalist covering the military community as well.
Just seeing some of your work that has been published in various different journals throughout the military community, I knew that at some point I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to connect because you have seen things from multiple different sides, both as a journalist, as someone who's coming from the military community, and just someone who's deeply committed to giving back. So I'm excited to have you on, and we'll go ahead and get started. The first question that I had is, can you give us a little bit more insight as to who you are and where you come from?
Sure. Well, I grew up as a military kid, which you've kind of alluded to already. My dad was in the Army for 20 years. We moved around a lot when I was younger, but then spent most of my formative years, I guess you could say, growing up in Hampton Roads, which military people will recognize. That's the home of Norfolk Navy base is in Hampton Roads. You have Joint Base Langley Eustis now. It used to be Fort Monroe, where my dad was stationed, so that's no longer a base. But anyway, just a really big military area. Our house was 5 minutes from Langley, so dealt with all of that jet noise now that takes some used to again when I go back. But anyway, I've been a journalist for about 8 years now. I'm a freelance reporter, like I said, but my last newsroom job was at Military Times. I was telling the stories of the military community there. And it was just really amazing to be part of that military culture and community again. I didn't realize how much I had missed it. A lot of my colleagues were veterans or also former military brats. And so got to go on military bases for some interviews and was really just welcomed into the community again. And I wanted to find a way to keep that up. So enter the podcast.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I'll say about your podcast when it comes to supporting the military community is you cover such a wide range of topics, and a lot of them are really focused on the family members, the spouses, the children, which I think is essential because there are a lot of military centric podcasts out there, but I don't think personally there's enough of them that cover the family life. What do our significant others go through? What is it like for our children to be uprooted and move from one state to another to a different country where they don't even understand the language? So I'm really glad that you are tackling some of those subjects.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And the other question that I had for you was, when we talk about the spouse angle, why is it so personal to you? And can you tell us what it is that kind of set you on that path?
Yeah, absolutely. When I left Military Times last summer to go out on my own as a freelancer, I knew that I really wanted to start a podcast. Didn't know necessarily what it was going to be about. That was the dream that I had. So started talking with some of my military spouse friends about the possibility and, just kind of starting those conversations. What I was hearing was that spouses were really relying on their service members to kind of keep them informed about new policy changes or things in the news that would affect them. But as you probably know, that information wasn't always getting through to them. It wasn't always coming down the chain. So they'd see these big news stories out there and weren't really sure like how it would affect them as a military family. I know that there are a lot of military spouse podcasts out there, really great ones, usually by military spouses, for military spouses, talking about their experiences as a spouse. However, I thought that by bringing in my news and my journalism background and focusing on that, it was kind of a different niche and really just digging into specific changes in the military, how that's going to affect spouses and family members personally. I'm not a spouse, but I was a family member and I watched my mom go through a lot of hard things as a military spouse. And so I just thought that I could kind of mesh all those experiences together and provide a different kind of service in the podcast format that you can listen to on the go or, stuck at home like now, like we are now.
Right, absolutely.
So it's called the spouse angle because as a journalist, I often get asked, what's your angle? And sometimes it's not a very nice question, but my angle here is to break down the news for a military spouse audience, like, I said. And so I thought that put that right in the title and actually partnering with an old colleague of mine, Andrea Scott, she had a great vision for this someday becoming maybe a bigger brand more than just a podcast, having other types of content as well. So we're excited to see where that goes. And it's definitely been a really fun project. And yeah, that's really my passion. That's where that comes from.
Well, like I said, I personally think you are doing an incredible job.
Oh, that means a lot. Thank you.
No, absolutely. So, when we speak about your experiences as a military child, what were some of the issues that you and your family experienced and were impacted by, whether that be positive or negative?
I think one of the biggest issues for us was the family separations. And I want to preface this. My dad retired in 2003. So he was in largely during peacetime. So my experiences were very different than, a military kid now whose parent is going off to fight a war for who knows how long. And just that fear of having a parent in harm's way. So just want to add that caveat that I know that it's not the same. But my dad did go on, TDYs and actually his last year in the Army, he got stationed in Alabama. We were all supposed to go, but then September 11th happened. And so they changed the orders at the last minute. And my mom's a teacher and the school year had already started. So we didn't end up going to Alabama with him. So we were separated for a little over a year. And that was probably the hardest that I can remember. And for me as a kid, middle school age, also with my mom working full time, there were just a lot of things in my mind that I didn't understand. And as a kid, I just kept hearing a lot of no's and things I wasn't allowed to do, like wasn't allowed to play sports that year or do some other extracurricular activities, even at church and stuff, because it was just a lot for my mom to handle while trying to work full time and managing two kids, being a single parent essentially. So for me, I just remember that being a really tough year. And now looking back, I totally understand as a parent myself, like that's just a lot to juggle for my mom. And it's hard to explain that to a kid. And they're probably just trying to shield me from the embarrassment of playing sports anyway, because I'm terrible at anything athletic. But at the time, it just felt like because my dad is not here, I do not get to have a normal life like all of my friends. So that was one thing. I mean, I think the frequent separations obviously saw them take a toll on my mom as well. But you asked for positive experiences too. I think just really the friendships that I was able to make as a military kid. Grew up with a lot of military kids at my school and my church. And yeah, it's heartbreaking when one of your close friends moves away. It's really, really tough. And I remember that emotion vividly. But on the flip side of that, I'm actually still really close friends with three other girls my age who our parents were stationed together in Germany when we were like 0 to 3. And three of us live now here in the DC area and we hang out and we're super close friends. And it's just amazing. I mean, the military made that happen. Our families moved several times, but then all ended up back in the same place when we were high school age. So that's been really cool just to see those friendships stick around. And I would say one of the really positive things about that military experience is the family friendships because you're not near your actual family. So the people you're stationed with become like family. I would say that was definitely a positive experience.
Yes, I could not agree more. For me, the military gave me a family, and most of my family, I'd say probably like 95% of them are all in Southern California. I have, two cousins in New York, some like in the Midwest, but a good majority of the ones that I'm closest to are here in California. So for sure, when I left, whether it was a deployment or, I got stationed in Virginia, you have no one to kind of be that support system there for you. You have no one that you really know. So for me, it's easier because I work with these guys day in and day out. So I'm able to form those bonds. And it's amazing to hear your story that even years later, those bonds that you formed when you were younger are still something that you cherish now. So that is one thing that I definitely see as a positive in the lives of military children is the events that we have, whether it's birthday parties or promotion ceremonies, it's always a family environment. So you do make very, very close bonds. But you're right. Once it's time to say goodbye, which you never know when it's going to happen, to be honest, that's tough, especially on kids because they don't know why. They don't understand the full scope of what's going on. So there's definitely pros and cons, but I truly admire any military family that chooses this lifestyle. It's just tough. So it's good to see that on your end, it did work out and it did bring some great relationships. One thing that I wanted to find out a little bit more when it comes to your podcast is over time, as you've started tackling issues like military housing, mental health, and changes to education, what kind of feedback are you receiving from the community? Like, how are they receiving it?
The feedback has been really great, honestly. It's been really humbling for me whenever I meet spouses and they say thank you. They really enjoy the show and it's helped them. You mentioned the mental health. That was episode number 2. And my guests were amazing and just got really open and really raw about their experiences and their struggles with depression and even suicide and as military spouses. So I was so grateful for that. And it just showed that I wasn't afraid to tackle the tough issues early on and head on. And I think maybe that helped gain some respect. Even in my first episode, I talked about a reimbursement that's available for spouses in licensed career fields, like nurses, therapists, lawyers, etc. And someone told me, like, wow, I had no idea. I'm going to go apply. And so, I mean, seriously, I just helped save that person potentially $1,000. So that makes it worth it. And like I said, it's just really humbling. And to be honest, I had thought maybe I was going to have a hard time getting the respect of the military spouse community because, like I said, I'm not a military spouse. I don't pretend to know everything that they go through. I was a military kid. I'm a reporter. I'm an observer, but I don't live in their shoes. And so I was kind of worried initially about how that was going to be received. But honestly, I haven't felt that at all. It's been really welcoming. I think everyone's looking for an ally. So everyone I've talked to has just been really supportive and I'm grateful for that.
No, I feel the exact same sentiment when it comes to launching the Unwavering. In the beginning, we also tackled some of those subjects. I talked to one of my really, really good friends and mentors, someone I look up to, and we talked about how he was in a helicopter crash and how it affected him. He broke it down, gave us some very dark truths, but I think it was important because you're right. Some of these taboo subjects, a lot of us are too scared to broach those subjects. We're too scared to ask for help. And I won't lie, initially my first thought was, how is this going to be perceived when I publish it? Are people going to be offended that I'm talking about suicide, that I'm talking about drugs and alcohol? Which, yeah, I get it. They're dark things to talk about, but enough people go through it that it needs to be discussed. We need to make it more normal to talk about. And so just having that opportunity to talk with my friend and actually ask him some questions that even though we've known each other for years, I never brought it up. I found out a lot more. And afterwards, we talked about it, and he's like, man, I can't believe you made me do that. I said, hey, I didn't make you do it. He's like, no, you know what? Honestly, like, as long as it helps someone else, I don't mind putting all of my business out there. I rather help save someone and have someone not go through what I went through. So things like that, or sharing things that are going to help people save money, be financially sound, create generational wealth for them and their families. It's great to be able to provide that to the community and know that they do have people that are there to advocate for them. So, yeah, it's just awesome. I'm glad that we kind of share that same passion. And to your point about you being scared because you aren't a military spouse, I get that. But at the same time, I think you being a military child holds a significant amount of weight because, sure, you didn't go through it from a spouse's point of view, but our children go through incredibly difficult things, positive things as well. But yeah, I would think that the military community would accept you with open arms for sure.
It's really been fun making a lot of connections and seeing people recommend the podcast to their spouse. I mean, that's really the highest honor is just when someone's like, "Oh, I love your podcast. You send it to my friends." I mean, that's just amazing to hear that. And from the beginning, I've been saying like if each episode helps one person, like it was worth all the I mean, it takes a lot of work to put out a podcast on the back end of things, but it's worth all of that if it helps one person.
Yes, 100%. I completely agree. So, over the course of your podcast, what have been some of the most interesting stories that you've covered? What are the ones that stand out the most to you?
That's a great question. Well, I think every episode is interesting to me. I learned something new from all of my guests. But episode 3 really comes to mind. I had on Chris Goldsmith from Vietnam Veterans of America, who came on and talked about how Russian trolls have actually been targeting the military community for years. Started really around the time of the 2016 election. But that was so eye opening to me and crazy to think just how easily it is to be manipulated online. These trolls were taking news stories from years ago and then slapping on a new date and making it seem like this is happening now. You should worry about all of your benefits and, just things like that. It was just like a lot of manipulation. And so that was just really eye opening to me. Another episode that really opened my eyes, I would say, that was really interesting was episode 16. That was, I interviewed two military moms of children with special needs. And really, just the hoops that these families have to jump through every time they go to a new duty station is just astounding. And so I learned a lot in that episode as well. Those are two that stand out as just being eye opening to me, just bringing up new issues. And like you said, I mean, as a military kid, I don't have the spouse side of things, but I do have like the military family kind of lens when I go into these stories and these questions. And it's just like, wow, things have really changed, but also just things that you don't have to go through because I wasn't in a family with kids with special needs. And these people are rock stars, really.
No, definitely. And touching on your first one for episode number 3, the ability for different entities or different organizations, different countries to manipulate the news and incite fear, it's a dangerous thing. I absolutely love technology. I love the fact that it does give us the ability to talk to people all across the world. But that's one thing that I do like to study and understand is how is technology, things like artificial intelligence, drones, like how is that playing an impact on us tomorrow? And when you talk about things like national security, you're right. Russians, Chinese, different governments with malicious intent can misconstrue information and again incite fear. So it's just one of those times where you really have to be wary of what you are reading and how much you allow it to impact you mentally because it's scary to see the type of information that's out there and sometimes you don't know if it's true or not. So I'm glad that you are bringing that up. And then it's cool to see that one week you talk about that, the next week you're talking to spouses with special needs. Your podcast is just so dynamic. It brings so many different things to the table that I think it's really unique. So the last thing that I wanted to do was kind of open it up to you and learn a little bit more about what's next. Like I said, you've been doing an incredible job, and I think there's still so much more that you have the potential to do for the community. What are some things that you are working on right now?
Actually, it's funny that you asked that because I just got off of recording. Andrea and I recorded a good news show. I don't know if you've seen John Krasinski's Some Good News. Have you seen that going around at all?
I have not, no.
He kind of started like a spoof where he talks about all the good news that's happening during this coronavirus pandemic. And so we were inspired to kind of do that for the military edition, highlighting some of the good stories coming out of the military community. So that's a project I'm really excited about. We did a video, which usually Spa Single is just a podcast. And so doing a video show for the first time, that's something that we might try to do again. We are currently working on getting our website up and running. If you go to thespouseangle.com right now, it redirects to my personal website, but you can still find all of the podcast episodes. So really just trying to grow the podcast, grow the audience, and finding new ways to do that.
That's incredible. I think definitely tapping into the different mediums that are available for the auditory learners. Things like podcasts are great for people who like written language, then obviously blogs and things like that. And then, of course, when it comes to video content, YouTube, Patreon, all these different platforms are essential. So it is cool to see that you are working on that. And I'm sure that you have some really cool things coming down the pipeline. So we'll definitely stay tuned for that. We'll make sure that whenever you give us the green light that the new website's up and stuff like that, we do mention it because I'm a huge advocate for what you're doing. And I think that a lot of our listeners would be really intrigued to see what you're doing. So we'll make sure to stay in contact for that.
Awesome. Yeah.
How can people connect with you? You mentioned that you do have a website. Can you give us, social media links, different things like that, ways for us to contact you?
Absolutely. Anyone can email us at podcast@thespouseangle.com. Feel free to send tips. Story tips are always welcome. Any comments on the show, concerns, complaints, snide remarks, they're all welcome. Podcast@thespouseangle.com. You can find new episodes every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. Just search for The Spouse Angle, and also on Facebook and Instagram at Spouse Angle Podcast, and Twitter at The Spouse Angle, because at Spouse Angle Podcast was too long for Twitter, so we had to change it up. So that's at Spouse Angle Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, at The Spouse Angle for Twitter. And so, yeah, we'd love for your listeners to come over and follow us.
Awesome. And before we go, is there one piece of advice you would like to provide with everyone listening today?
Oh gosh. I was not prepared for this. um, I think one thing that's really come to light, especially in this coronavirus time where we're stuck inside, stuck at home, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to that military community if you don't have family nearby. I just had a spouse that I was recording with yesterday talk about how she actually got the coronavirus, and her military community left food at her door. They left activities for her children. They did a ton of stuff that she just was not expecting. And you have those kind of people out there who are willing to do anything for you. So reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for help, especially in difficult times like this.
Well, thank you for answering that. Yes, completely unscripted, unprepared, and 100% genuine. So thank you so much, Natalie, for taking the time out of your day to join us, to talk to us about your experiences and leave us with some powerful guidance and mentorship. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for listening to The Unwavering. Please rate and comment on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star and a great comment, and we may just read it on a future episode. Also, follow us on social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to check back with us next week.